Hi, I'm John Hornick. Welcome to lesson 57 of Chef's Apprentice, learning to cook like a pro, one small plate at a time. This lesson is Mirin black bean soup with sauteed prosciutto skewer. This preparation introduces dried beans, in this case black beans. Instead of using canned beans, you will learn to soak and cook the beans. You can use this technique to prep and cook any kind of beans. Note that the beans are seasoned after cooking. Salting dried beans before cooking can make them tough. Techniques today are soaking and cooking beans, chopping, portioning prosciutto, sweating mirepoix, deglazing and reducing, seasoning, bringing to a boil and simmering, sauteing, browning and keeping warm, pureeing, adjusting seasoning, plating, and garnishing from on high. So let's start cooking. Let's talk about the mise en place for lesson 57. We'll need to have 8 ounces by weight, that's by weight, of black beans that you've soaked in water overnight. Make sure they're covered by at least 1 inch of water. We'll need have about 1/3 of a cup of chopped shallots, about 1/4 of a cup of chopped celery, about 1/4 of a cup of chopped carrots, about 2 tablespoons of chopped garlic, about 2 tablespoons of chopped scallions, thinly sliced actually, both the green part and the white part. We'll need to have some olive oil. We'll need to have about 2 cups of chicken stock. Now I made the chicken stock a while ago. I had it frozen, so I've just thawed it out in a saucepan here. You need to have about 2 cups of chicken stock. Remember, we make our own stock here. There's separate lessons on how to make stock. We'll need to have kosher salt and a peppermill. About 1/2 of a cup of white wine or dry vermouth. I'm just going to eyeball that when we get to it. Also need to have about 1/4 of a cup of Mirin. I'm just going to eyeball that when we get to it. And then we'll need to have some hunks of prosciutto. Now, any place that sells prosciutto by the slice from the deli counter is going to have the big pieces of prosciutto that they slice it from. The back end of that, which is kind of narrow and cone-shaped, they often don't really have a market for that. Some places will use it to make some kind of food that they sell. Other places will sell it to you. Ask for a prosciutto end, okay? Ask them to cut the prosciutto end about 3/8 of an inch or 1/2 inch thick, and then cut from that some cubes. Now, the description calls for 12 cubes. That would be 2 per person to serve 6 people as a small plate. I'm only making 2 tonight, but I cut these cubes about 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch long and 3/8 of an inch square, and I put them on these cool little bamboo skewers. You can get these almost anywhere now, but you can also use just the long, straight bamboo skewers that you can find in almost any grocery store. And I'm only doing two servings tonight, so I've actually put 3 chunks on the skewers, but description calls for 2. You could do 3, you could do 4, whatever you want to do. Okay, that's all the ingredients we need. We'll break now, come back, and I'll show you the equipment for lesson 57. Now for lesson 57, we're going to need a cutting board and a chef's knife. We'll need to have a bowl to soak those beans in. It's just a stainless steel bowl. You could use any bowl. We'll also need to have a peeler to peel a carrot, which you're going to chop. We'll need to have those bamboo skewers that I mentioned when I was talking about the prosciutto. You'll need 6 of those if you're doing 6 small plates. We need to have a saucepan and a wooden spoon to cook the soup. And we will need to have a skillet to brown the prosciutto skewers. We'll also need to have a blender. We're using the Ninja blender today. And a strainer and rubber spatula to strain the soup after we've pureed it. Then we'll need bowls to plate up, haven't picked those yet, and then a ladle to ladle the soup into the bowls. That's all the equipment we need. We'll break now, come back, and start cooking lesson 57. Okay, the first thing on our prep list is to sweat the mirepoix. So we're going to add the shallots to the pan here, and the celery, carrots, a couple of tablespoons of olive oil. Get a little heat, medium heat. We're also going to do a little bit of seasoning, a little salt and pepper, lightly. Stir it up and let it sweat. Okay, the mineral product vegetables are looking pretty good, getting translucent. Let's add the garlic, and remember, it can burn fast and easily. So we're going to stir that, keep that moving. Let that sweat for 30 seconds or so. All right, now we're going to deglaze with about a half a cup of white wine or dry vermouth. We're going to let that reduce until it's just wet, almost dry. Okay, it's just wet. We're going to add the beans. Now, the beans were soaking in water overnight. I drained most of the water out, but you don't have to drain it all. It's good to leave some of that anyway. And then we're going to add stock to cover the beans. Now, I didn't use all the stock I had. I may need some more of that as they're cooking. So that's why we're starting with about 2 cups. All right, now we want to add some seasoning. And then we're going to bring this to a boil. And then we're going to reduce the heat and simmer it. We're going to bring the heat up. Good. Bring this to a boil. Okay, the beans are coming to a boil. Now we're going to reduce the heat to, low, between low and medium, somewhere between low and medium. And we're going to let this simmer for 1 to 2 hours. Now we're going to let it simmer until the beans are tender. Okay, that could take an hour, could take 2 hours, depends on your heat, how much liquid you have, all that stuff. Now, the higher your heat, the more often you're going to have to stir it. Okay, but if your heat's relatively low, stir it every now and then. Make sure there's liquid in there. Okay, if the liquid starts to evaporate down below the beans, add more liquid. You can either add stock. Camera cut out there. You can either add stock, we have more of that, or you can add water if you run out of the stock. Okay, so we're going to let this simmer for 1 to 2 hours on low. So I'm going to turn it down more to low heat because I see it's really boiling right now. Once your boiling goes away, if you come back, you might want to, you could probably raise the heat a little bit, but you want to make sure all that boiling goes away before you raise the heat up. Otherwise, it could burn. Okay, so the beans simmered for about 2 hours. They're now tender. I'm going to puree this. Now, you don't have to puree this soup. Some people like the beaniness in a black bean soup. I like smooth soups. I don't like lumpy soups. So I'm going to puree this soup and until it's smooth. Okay, let's see how it looks. It looks perfect, nice and smooth and creamy. All right, next we're going to strain the soup. Okay, so I just cleaned out the pan, the saucepan that we used to make the soup. I'm just going to strain soup back into that same pan. Okay, now we're going to add about 1/4 cup of mirin, just eyeballing that. And we're going to bring this to a boil. Now this soup is kind of thick, so we'll probably be thinning it a little bit later on, but because it's a little thicker, you're going to need to watch it. If your heat is medium, say medium, you'll need to watch it. If it's low, you won't need to watch it as much. We'll stir in that mirin, bring this to a boil. Okay, we're just starting to get the boiling, bubbling around the edges. We're going to reduce the heat to low. Want to make sure all the bubbling goes away, and we're going to let this simmer for about 5 minutes to burn off the alcohol in the mirin. Okay, so the soup is a little bit thick for my taste. This is the time when we would thin it. You know, if you like a thicker soup, you know, you don't have to thin it. I want it to be a little bit thinner than it was, so you're going to have to be the judge of that. Now, after we thin the soup, the next thing to do is to adjust the seasoning. So let's taste it. I don't think it needs any salt or any pepper. So we're going to declare this soup finished. Now we're going to keep this warm until we're ready to serve. All right, so now we're going to saute and brown the prosciutto skewers. And for this, I want to have about medium, maybe a little bit higher than medium heat. We're going to let this oil get hot. Okay, so we're getting a little whiffs of smoke off of the pan here, so we're just going to put our skewers in there, and we're going to let them saute. Okay, so these are looking pretty good. Just really what we're doing is we're warming them and getting some brown on the outside of them. Okay, so we're going to take these off the heat, turn the heat off, and we're going to keep these warm until it's time to serve. Okay, it's time to plate up. Remember, we're doing small plates, so we're using small bowls. I'm only plating up 2 tonight, but there's enough here for 6. We're going to garnish with the chopped scallions and prosciutto skewer on the edge. Actually, I see I have a little drip here. If you're going to cook like a pro, you need to have your presentation as close to perfect as you can get it. Okay, that is the conclusion of lesson 57, Mirin black bean soup with sauteed prosciutto skewers. You can see photos of the final dish at my Instagram, which is @ChefsApprentice Cook Like a Pro. Please remember to subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.